Missionaries were being machine-gunned on the roads. Red Cross ambulance workers were being killed. And what was absolutely scandalous is this was not only being funded by the Soviet Union and Red China, but by the World Council of Churches. The World Council of Churches was taking money from members in National Council of Churches in America and across Europe and putting that into what was called the Program to Combat Racism. Nice name, but it was funding terrorism, and they were murdering missionaries, and that's what we were fighting against.
The World Council of Churches used to be known as the Communist Party at prayer. It's a centralised body basically controlled once by the Soviet Union and now dominated by the Russians through the Russian Orthodox Church, which is totally controlled by the KGB, has been for years. Do you think in Russia, under Stalin, he revived the Russian Orthodox Church? Do you think he would have revived the Russian Orthodox Church had he not controlled it? Had he, this is an avowed atheist, living in an atheist system dedicated to the destruction of religion, but they revived the Russian Orthodox Church because they knew they could use it as a tool under KGB direction to influence other churches all over the world.
What I see is that the church has become an enemy of God, because it has been infiltrated with people that have degrees from elite institutions. And these are people that, they have come into the church, but they never were believers. There are some professors in divinity schools and seminaries that take delight in destroying the faith of innocent young people.
Christianity has always been the main target because they knew with a strong Christian church, their plans of a one-world government that requires a one-world religion to succeed would never be possible.
And I think that's why Christianity is a religion that people intent on despotism don't want around. The surest sign that the elites in our society are up to no good, just as the founders of our country predicted they would be, by the way, is that they're trying to get rid of Christianity. Because Christianity is what encourages people, emboldens people who live according to good conscience, acknowledging God, to stand firm in the right.
Step one was to remove God's word, the absolute authority and standard of the church.
It's as if the uncomfortable things that hold us accountable have slowly been scrubbed from the message from the pulpit. What was sin 2,000 years ago is sin today. And that's a message I think we need to hear quite often from the pulpit, and I don't hear it that much.
Research shows the majority of Americans don't believe anymore that the Bible is God's word. But a more amazing testimony to the left's success is the vast majority of seminaries in America don't either.
They realize that if you can influence churches, you can influence millions of people. So a lot of these people have had an end game in view, and part of the end game is seeking to enlist the church as pawns in their game.
Step two was to force real Christianity inside the four walls of the church, while sidetracking those that were just religious with do-gooder causes.
We Christians in the West, we are not even aware how much oppression we have in the U.S. We are persecuted without knowing it. They have told us, Christians, you can't do this. And said, yes, sir, we won't. You can't do, witness at your work. Okay, yeah, I won't. You can't talk against sin. Okay, sir, we won't do it. And so gradually, we Christians, what they allow us to do, okay, you can gather in your churches on Sunday, worship the best you can, and then go home. And we have accepted that type of Christianity. We have accepted that we should not and we cannot influence our society or the government. We have accepted those limitations that the enemy has put on us. And we have withdrawn into ourselves without even realizing it.
Something that is obscene is something that shouldn't be brought into public. When are Americans, particularly people of faith, going to realize that over the course of the last 60, 70 years in our country, we have allowed them to redefine the world so that Jesus is obscene, so that God is obscene, the Ten Commandments are obscene, kids wearing a t-shirt that says Jesus saved, kicked out of school, people wearing an F word all over their clothing, they can wander around.
As I dug in to find out how this had happened, I came across testimony from the Congressional Record in 1953. Manning Johnson, who was a top communist official, testified. He said, quote, "The communists discovered that the destruction of religion could proceed much faster through infiltration of the church. It was determined that with only small forces available, it would be necessary to concentrate communist agents in seminaries and divinity schools. These institutions would make it possible for a small communist minority to influence the ideology of future clergymen. The idea was to divert the emphasis from the spiritual to the material," unquote. The testimony continued with Benjamin Gitlow, who was one of the founders of the Communist Party USA. Quote, "The Methodist Federation for Social Action was first organized by Dr. Harry Ward. Its objective was to transform the Methodist Church and Christianity into an instrument for the achievement of socialism," unquote. Dr. Harry Ward was not only a communist, he was also a member of the Fabian Socialist Society. His good friend and fellow Fabian was Dr. Walter Rosenbusch, and unbelievably, those two men started what is today the National Council of Churches.
Unfortunately, most Christians these days are tragically biblically illiterate and are accepting anything that comes down the pike that has the name Jesus stamped upon it, but it's not the agenda of the Jesus of the Bible. It's basically a satanic agenda which is seeking to displace Jesus and exalt the worship of man and creation over the Creator.
The communist goal was to turn their number one enemy, the Christian church, into their greatest asset. That monumental task is almost complete. They are turning the evangelical church into a counterfeit that worships a false God, one they have created that is only love, with a false gospel, a do-gooder works salvation instead of Christ alone, and a false mission, saving the planet instead of fulfilling the Great Commission.